I used to believe that weddings were about love, about new beginnings and promises that last a lifetime. But on the night of my daughter's wedding, I learned that sometimes love is the first thing people are willing to sell. The ballroom shimmered with golden light. Laughter echoed across the tables, glasses clinked, and my daughter Emma looked radiant in her ivory gown. I sat quietly near the corner, smiling like every proud mother should. No one knew that beneath my calm face, my heart was trembling. They didn't know about the secret I carried, a secret worth more than everything in that glittering room. When my husband, Edward, passed away 3 years ago, he left behind not just memories, but a legacy, a fortune built from decades of hard work and sacrifice. He made me promise not to speak of it until the time was right. "You'll know when, Clara," he said. "You'll feel it in your heart." That night, watching my daughter's new husband, Ryan, raise a toast with that perfect fake smile, I began to understand what he meant. I had given them everything I could: love, support, my time, my trust. But as I watched Ryan whisper something in Emma's ear and saw her forced laugh, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. They weren't looking at me like family. They were looking at me like an opportunity. The music swelled, couples began to dance, and I slipped outside for air. That's when I heard them, Ryan's voice, low and cruel. "Don't worry, babe," he said. "Once we get the house signed over, she won't be our problem anymore." My knees almost gave out. I gripped the railing, forcing myself not to break. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was their target. And that night, under the soft glow of the wedding lights, I made a silent vow. They think they're playing a game, but they have no idea who they're up against. I didn't sleep that night. The echoes of Ryan's voice haunted me more than the wedding music. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his laughter, the cold, calculating kind that tells you've been fooled for a long time. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how long they'd been planning it. Weeks? Months? Or ever since Edward's funeral? When the morning sun crept through my curtains, I forced myself to smile. I couldn't let them see the storm brewing inside me. Emma called later that day, her voice sugar-sweet. "Mom, we're thinking of selling your old place," she said casually, like it wasn't the home where her father and I built our entire life. "It's too big for you alone. Ryan says we can handle everything for you." Handle everything for me. The words dripped like poison. I agreed to meet them for lunch. When I arrived, Ryan greeted me like a salesman who smelled profit. He pulled out my chair, flashed that charming grin, and said, "You deserve comfort, Clara. Let us take care of the paperwork. We'll make sure you're stable." Stable. That word hurt more than insult. They thought I was fragile. Weak. A burden. As I stirred my tea, I looked at them. Emma, my little girl who once cried when I scraped my knee, and Ryan, the man who saw me as a stepping stone to wealth. They didn't realize I was watching every move, memorizing every lie. When lunch ended, Ryan handed me a folder. "Just some transfer papers," he said. I smiled and took it, pretending to be clueless. But deep down, a quiet fire was forming. I walked away knowing one thing. Edward was right. There's a time to stay silent and a time to strike. That night, I opened Edward's old study for the first time in months. Dust clung to every book, and the smell of cedar and old paper filled the air. His chair still faced the window, as though he had just stepped out for a moment. I ran my fingers along the desk where he used to sit late into the night, going through ledgers and letters, humming that same tune I used to tease him about. I found the little wooden box he left me, the one I could never bring myself to open. Inside, a note in his handwriting. "If you're reading this, Clara, it means you've reached the moment I warned you about. Remember, silence is your weapon. They can't steal what they don't know exists." I held that note for a long time, tears stinging my eyes. Edward always saw farther than I did. He knew the world could be cruel, even family. The next morning, I went to the attic and pulled out a dusty folder labeled estate records. Inside were account details, property titles, and investment summaries. My hands trembled as I scanned the totals. It wasn't just wealth. It was power, quiet, invisible power. I could have confronted Emma and Ryan that very day, but I didn't. Instead, I made a decision. I would wait, just as Edward told me. Let them dig their own hole, and when they were deep enough, I'd be waiting at the edge, calm, composed, and holding every truth they tried to bury. I folded Edward's note, slipped it into my purse, and whispered, "Don't worry, love. I'm ready now." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a grieving widow. I felt like a strategist. Emma and Ryan showed up 2 days later without warning. I saw their car pull up from the kitchen window, a sleek black sedan that screamed ambition more than love. Ryan got out first, adjusting his tie like he was about to negotiate a business deal. Emma followed, wearing a smile too practiced to be real. I took a deep breath and reminded myself to stay calm. Let them think I was still the same naive mother who believed every word they said. The doorbell rang. I opened it slowly, pretending to be pleasantly surprised.
Mom.
We were just in the area, Emma chirped, her eyes darting around the living room like she was already measuring it. Ryan stepped forward with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. We thought we'd stop by to help with, some of the house stuff. House stuff. That's what they called my life now. I led them into the kitchen, offered coffee, and listened as Ryan talked about simplifying things, liquidating assets, and financial efficiency. He used words that made it sound like he was doing me a favor. When I didn't respond right away, Emma reached for my hand. "Mom, you've done so much for us. Maybe it's time you let us take care of you for a change." For a moment, my heart ached. I wanted to believe she meant it. But then Ryan's phone buzzed, and I caught a glimpse of the message that flashed across the screen before he turned it away. "Make sure she signs this week." I looked at the folder in his briefcase. My name was printed neatly on the label. I smiled gently and said, "You're right, dear. Maybe it is time I let someone else handle things." Ryan relaxed, smug and certain of victory. But deep inside, I was already setting my trap. For the next few days, I played my role perfectly. The confused widow, the fragile mother, the woman who still needed guidance. Ryan called daily to check in, asking about my mood, my meals, my sleep, all in that tone people use when they're really checking for compliance. Emma followed his lead, visiting often, pretending it was about love. But I could see the calculation in her eyes, the guilt she tried to hide under her smiles. One afternoon, Ryan arrived with another folder, this time a thicker one. He explained it was the final paperwork. I nodded sweetly, asking questions in the soft, uncertain voice he expected. "And this will make things easier for you and Emma, right?" I asked. He grinned. "For all of us, Clara. You'll be in good hands." After he left, I didn't open the folder right away. I brewed tea, sat at the dining table, and watched the light fade outside. Then I opened it. Inside were legal transfer forms, property, investments, accounts, all neatly labeled with my name. Ryan had even prepared a power of attorney form, granting him full access to manage my estate. He really thought I'd sign it. I almost laughed. Instead, I called Mr. Harris, Edward's old lawyer. A kind man, quiet but sharp. He owed Edward a favor, and when I explained everything, he listened carefully. "Don't confront them yet," he said. "Let them believe they're winning. I'll draft something that protects you and teaches them a lesson they won't forget." I hung up, smiling to myself. The next morning, when Ryan dropped by, I greeted him with tea and said gently, "I've decided, dear. I'll sign everything next week." His eyes lit up with greed, mine with resolve. Because by next week, I'd be the one holding all the cards. 2 days later, I drove downtown for the first time in months. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, the city lights blurring past as I replayed every word Ryan had said in my head. "You'll be in good hands, Clara." Oh, how wrong he was. Mr. Harris's office was tucked in an old brick building, the kind that smelled of leather and old law books. When I walked in, he was already waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a small knowing smile. "You look stronger than the last time we spoke," he said softly. I sat down across from him, and he slid a document toward me. This, he explained, is a revised agreement, identical in appearance to the one Ryan drafted, except for one crucial change. It transfers everything into an irrevocable trust under your control. They'll think they're inheriting power, but they'll be signing away every right to it. I studied the paper, tracing my fingers over the new clause he'd added. It was elegant, simple, and devastatingly effective. So when I sign, I asked, they'll believe they own it all? He nodded. Exactly. They'll never suspect until it's too late. A strange calm washed over me. Not revenge, not anger, just closure waiting to happen. For years I'd lived under the illusion that love and loyalty could never turn sour. Now I knew better. Before leaving, I thanked him quietly. Edward trusted you, I said. I see why. As I stepped out into the fading sunlight, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. The world didn't seem so heavy anymore. I wasn't the old Clara who cried over betrayal. I was the woman Edward had prepared me to become. By the time I reached home, I was ready. The trap was set. And next week, when Emma and Ryan came back for my signature, I would finally show them who they had underestimated. The morning of the signing felt unnaturally calm. I woke early, brewed coffee, and set the dining table with care. Fine china, fresh flowers, and just enough warmth to disguise the storm waiting beneath. The house smelled of cinnamon and deception. When the doorbell rang, I didn't rush. I wanted them to wait a moment, to feel like guests, not owners. When I finally opened the door, Ryan stood there holding his briefcase like a trophy, and Emma's face glowed with false affection. Mom, you look wonderful, she said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume was too sweet, her smile too tight. Thank you, darling, I replied smoothly. Shall we get started? They followed me to the table, where the documents Mr. Harris had prepared sat neatly stacked, identical to Ryan's version in every visible way. I watched Ryan's confidence swell as he explained each page, pretending to guide me, making sure I signed the right places. Inside, I was almost impressed. He didn't just want money. He wanted control, the satisfaction of conquest. Emma nodded along, her eyes darting between me and the papers. As I reached for the pen, I paused. It's strange, isn't it? I said softly. How the people you trust most can turn out to be the ones who teach you the hardest lessons. Ryan laughed awkwardly. Well, life's full of lessons, Clara. Yes, I said, smiling faintly. And some of them are worth millions. I signed each page with slow, deliberate strokes, sealing their illusion. When we finished, Ryan exhaled like a man who had just claimed victory. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand, whispering, You won't regret this, Mom. But I already knew they would. As they drove away, the house fell quiet again. I picked up my phone, called Mr. Harris, and said just one sentence. It's done. Activate the trust. The real game had just begun. 3 days later, the first cracks in Ryan's confidence began to show. He called early in the morning, his voice unusually sharp. Clara, I've been trying to access the investment account, he said, pretending to sound calm. The login isn't working. Did you change something? I smiled faintly at my reflection in the window. Oh, that's strange, I replied innocently. Maybe it's a technical issue. You know how these systems are. Behind his practiced patience, I could hear the panic. He mumbled something about checking with the bank and hung up quickly. By afternoon, Emma arrived, this time without her usual charm. Her smile was gone, replaced by worry and suspicion. Mom, she started, Ryan says there's some kind of problem with the transfer. The lawyer hasn't sent the confirmation. I looked up from my knitting and said softly, Really? That's odd. He assured me everything was in order. She frowned, pacing the living room. You did sign the papers, right? Yes, dear, I said, setting my yarn aside. I signed exactly what Ryan gave me. Technically, I wasn't lying. I had signed, just not his version. That night, I received an email from Mr. Harris. Trust activated. All assets secured. They have no legal claim. I exhaled deeply, my heart steady for the first time in weeks. It was over. The house, the accounts, the inheritance, everything Edward built and left behind was now safe. The next day, Ryan showed up again, furious. "You tricked us, didn't you?" he hissed. I met his glare, without flinching. "No, Ryan. I protected myself." For a long moment, he just stood there, realizing the game was over. Then, silently, he walked out, taking his greed with him. As the door closed, I whispered to myself, "Edward, we finally did it. They can't hurt us anymore." A week passed before the house felt normal again. The silence that once haunted me now felt peaceful, almost comforting. I spent my mornings tending to Edward's garden. His roses still bloomed as if guarding the house from bitterness. But peace, as I'd learned, doesn't always come without reminders. One crisp morning, a letter arrived, handwritten in elegant cursive. The return address made my heart skip, from Edward's old attorney's estate. I opened it carefully. Inside was a small note and an envelope sealed with the same wax emblem Edward used for our anniversary cards. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means you've faced what I feared most, betrayal from those you love. I wanted to leave you something more than wealth. I wanted to leave you strength. You've always had it, but sometimes we only find our courage when we're forced to stand alone. Edward." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the paper to my chest, whispering, "You knew, didn't you?" Under the letter was a small key. I recognized it instantly. The one from the antique box Edward had kept in his study. Inside that box, I found old photos, a silver locket, and a final note. "Promise me, Clara, that you'll live, not just survive. Travel, laugh, build something new. Don't let their greed take your light." That night, I sat by the window, holding the locket close. For years, I had defined myself by loss and betrayal. But now I realized my story wasn't about revenge. It was about rediscovery. The next morning, I packed a suitcase. Not to escape, but to begin again. I didn't know where the road would take me, but for the first time in decades, I was free to choose it myself. The morning I left my old house, the sky was painted in soft gold. The same sun that once witnessed my tears now felt like it was blessing my freedom. I took one last look at the porch, the roses, and the curtains that had seen both my laughter and my loneliness. I didn't leave in anger. I left in peace. The road stretched ahead, unfamiliar yet full of promise. I drove past the lake Edward loved, the one where we used to have Sunday picnics. For a brief moment, I could almost hear his laugh carried by the wind. It made me smile instead of cry. My first stop was a small coastal town 2 hours away. It wasn't fancy, just quiet, with blue cottages, art galleries, and a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and hope. I rented a modest apartment overlooking the sea and spent the evening unpacking, humming a tune I hadn't remembered in years. That night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching waves shimmer under the moonlight. For so long, I had been surrounded by people who saw my kindness as weakness. But now, I was surrounded by nothing but the sound of the ocean and my own strength. I opened Edward's locket once more. Inside, behind the tiny photograph, was a hidden inscription I hadn't noticed before. "Freedom is the richest inheritance of all." A tear rolled down my cheek, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was gratitude. Tomorrow, I would visit the local art school, maybe volunteer, maybe teach, maybe just learn again. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. For the first time in years, Clara Morgan wasn't just surviving her past. She was living her future. It had been 2 months since I moved to the small coastal town, and every day still felt like a quiet miracle. The air carried the scent of salt and freedom, and the sound of seagulls replaced the echo of family arguments that once filled my life. I spent my mornings walking along the beach with a cup of coffee, letting the waves wash over my feet. I had started volunteering at the local art school, not teaching, not yet, but helping with community events, arranging exhibits, and talking to students who reminded me what passion looked like. That's where I met Eleanor, the school's director, a woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and the same wisdom I used to see in my own mirror. One day she said, "You have the hands of someone who's seen too much and still creates beauty." Her words stayed with me. For so long, I had defined myself by pain and betrayal. But here, in this little town by the sea, I was rediscovering joy in the smallest things: the laughter of children, the smell of oil paint, the glow of sunlight through sea glass. In the evenings, I'd write letters to Edward, not to send them, but to speak to him in my own way. I'd tell him about the gulls, the markets, the strangers who smiled back. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eleanor handed me a flyer. "We're hosting a charity art gala next month," she said. "I think you should showcase something of your own." I hesitated. "Oh, I haven't painted in years." She smiled knowingly. "Then it's time to start again." That night, I stared at the blank canvas in my new studio. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of starting over. I dipped my brush into the paint and whispered, "Here's to new beginnings." The blank canvas sat in front of me for days. Every morning, I'd walk past it, coffee in hand, and feel it watching me, daring me to tell my story in color. It had been nearly 20 years since I last painted anything meaningful. Back then, I'd painted love. Now I was learning to paint healing. I began with a deep blue, the color of the sea that surrounded my new life. Then I added gold streaks, not for luxury, but for light breaking through darkness. As I worked, I realized I wasn't painting scenery. I was painting memory. Each brushstroke carried pieces of my past: the betrayal, the loneliness, the rediscovery. Eleanor visited one afternoon, quietly watching as I mixed shades. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "But there's pain in it too." "There's always pain in beauty," I replied. "That's how we know it's real." She smiled. "Then it'll touch people." When the day of the art gala arrived, the town hall was alive with laughter, music, and the scent of sea lilies. My painting hung in the center of the room, titled Resilience, a stormy sky breaking open to reveal a beam of golden light over calm waters. People stopped to stare longer than I expected. Some asked if it was about loss, others about rebirth. I just smiled and said, "Both." Then, near the end of the evening, a man approached me. He was in his early 60s, kind eyes framed by glasses, his suit simple but elegant. He said, "You've captured what it means to begin again." There was something familiar in his voice, something grounding. He introduced himself, Henry Lawson, a retired writer who had moved to the coast after losing his wife. That night, we talked for hours about art, grief, and second chances. When I walked home, the moonlight followed me like a silent blessing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a widow. I felt alive. The days after the gala passed softly, like slow-moving clouds over calm water. Henry and I began meeting at the same seaside cafe every morning. He'd bring his notebook, and I'd bring a sketchpad. We didn't talk much at first. Sometimes, silence felt like the purest kind of conversation. He'd write while I painted. Sometimes he'd read me a line or two, poetic fragments about grief, love, and redemption. I never expected companionship to return to my life, especially not this gently. Henry wasn't trying to fill the space Edward had left. He was simply helping me remember that life could still surprise me. One evening, as we walked along the pier, the sun sinking low behind us, Henry said quietly, "You paint hope, Clara, even when you think you're painting pain." I smiled. "And you write truth, even when you think you're writing fiction." He laughed, and for the first time in years I laughed too, not politely, not nervously, but freely. Our friendship grew without expectations. No grand confessions, no promises. Just shared tea, long walks, and the unspoken comfort of two souls who'd survived their storms. But deep inside, I knew something was changing. I was beginning to trust again, not just in people, but in the idea that my heart could still bloom after all it had endured. That night, I returned home, looked at my reflection, and realized something profound. I wasn't the woman who had been betrayed, forgotten, or silenced anymore. I was a woman rediscovering herself, one brushstroke, one heartbeat, one sunrise at a time. The sea had become my sanctuary. Every wave whispered peace, until one afternoon, the past found its way to my doorstep. I was arranging flowers in a small vase when I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant. I opened the door expecting Eleanor, maybe Henry. But instead, it was Amanda, my daughter. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Her hair was shorter, her eyes tired, but her voice was the same, shaky, uncertain. "Mom," she said quietly. I didn't know where else to go. The words hit harder than I expected. I hadn't heard her call me Mom in years. I stepped aside without speaking, and she walked in, her gaze taking in my modest coastal cottage, the paintings, the sunlight, the quiet peace she had once destroyed. She sat down, clutching her purse like a shield. "Chad left," she said finally. "The business failed. The house is gone. I don't have anyone else." I should have felt satisfaction, even vindication, but instead, I felt something heavier, pity, maybe sorrow. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the cold daughter who had betrayed me. She was broken, just like I once had been. Henry arrived a few minutes later, bringing coffee, unaware of who sat in my living room. His warm, steady presence calmed me. Amanda glanced at him, then back at me. "You look happy," she said softly. I didn't think I'd ever see you like this again. I took a long breath. Neither did I. That night, after she left, I stood by the window, watching the moon reflect over the waves. I wasn't sure what to feel, forgiveness or fear. The past had returned, but I wasn't the same woman anymore. This time, I held the power to choose what forgiveness meant. The house felt different after Amanda's visit, quieter, heavier, as if the walls were holding their breath. I spent that night sitting by the window, watching the tide roll in and out, wondering if forgiveness was strength or weakness. Henry noticed the change in me right away. "Over breakfast," he said softly. "You're distant today." I sighed. "Amanda came yesterday." He paused, his hand frozen halfway to his cup. "And she's lost. Alone. But I don't know if I can open that door again, Henry. Every time I start to heal, the past knocks again." Henry reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "You don't owe anyone your peace, Clara. Not even family. But maybe closure isn't about letting them in. Maybe it's about letting go." His words stayed with me long after he left. I walked down to the beach, barefoot, the sand cold under my feet. The ocean roared louder than usual, like it was arguing with me, urging me to choose. I thought about the years Amanda stole from me, about the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd been a bad mother. And yet, a part of me still saw her as the little girl who used to bring me seashells and say, "This one's for you, Mommy." Forgiveness didn't feel like weakness that day. It felt like survival. But I knew one thing for sure. If Amanda wanted to come back into my life, it would have to be on my terms. I went home, picked up my phone, and typed a message. "You can visit again, Amanda. But not to ask, to talk. If you're ready to listen, I'll be here." Then I hit send. The message wasn't about reconciliation. It was a line in the sand, a new beginning, if she dared to cross it. Amanda came again a week later, her eyes red but determined. She stood at my door holding a small box, the kind people keep secrets in. "I know you probably don't want to see me," she said, "but I have to tell you something." We sat at the same kitchen table where I'd spent years praying for her to come home. My hands trembled slightly as she opened the box. Inside were old letters, yellowed, folded, fragile. My letters. The ones I'd written to her after she threw me out. "I never got these," she whispered. "Chad intercepted them. Every single one. He told me you'd stopped writing. That you didn't care anymore." The words hit me like thunder. I stared at the stack of envelopes, recognizing my own handwriting, the apologies, the love, the desperate attempts to reach my daughter. "He read them?" I asked quietly. Amanda nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "He said they'd just make things worse." I believed him. And when I fought, and sometimes the person you lost along the way. For the first time in years, my home didn't echo with loneliness, it echoed with memories. Amanda had started visiting often. We'd drink tea, talk about small things, avoid the big ones. But Henry noticed what I tried to ignore. "There's something she isn't saying," he said one evening as we washed dishes together. "You can feel it. Every time you mention her husband, her shoulders tense." I wanted to defend her, but deep down, I knew he was right. Amanda's smiles didn't reach her eyes. She carried the kind of guilt that doesn't fade overnight. A week later, as we walked along the shore, I asked, "Amanda, why now? Why come back after all these years?" She hesitated, staring at the waves. "Because I didn't just lose the house, Mom. I lost myself. I spent years being someone Chad wanted me to be: cold, distant, blind. When he left, I realized how much of me was already gone." Her voice cracked. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, but I stayed still. "And there's something else," she whispered. "Before Chad left, he told me something. Something about Dad's old company, and about you." My heart skipped. "What about me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a folded envelope. Old, worn, with my late husband's handwriting on it. "I found it hidden in Chad's things," she said. "He said it could change everything." I stared at the letter, my pulse quickening. The air around us shifted. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open another door from the past, but I knew this one wouldn't wait. That night, I sat alone at my desk, staring at the letter Amanda had given me. My late husband's handwriting, firm, deliberate, and achingly familiar, stared back at me. For minutes, I couldn't bring myself to open it. My hands shook like they did the day he passed away. Finally, I tore the envelope open. Inside were 2 folded pages, yellowed with time. The first line made my breath hitch. "If you're reading this, Clara, it means the truth can no longer stay buried." He wrote that Sterling had been his mentor, and also his biggest mistake. The partnership had soured when Sterling manipulated the books and pinned the losses on him. My husband spent years trying to rebuild our life from that betrayal. But then came the part that shattered me. He had known about Sterling's connection to me. He had discovered that Sterling was my biological father, but he never told me. He wrote, "I wanted to protect you from a truth that would only hurt you, but hiding it has haunted me every day. I hope someday you understand." Tears spilled down my cheeks. Amanda watched silently from across the table. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't mean to bring back the pain." But I wasn't angry at her. Not anymore. The truth didn't destroy me this time. It clarified everything. My past, my inheritance, my pain. They were all connected by the choices of powerful men who thought secrets could buy peace. As I folded the letter back, I felt a strange calm. My husband had lied, yes, but maybe he had done it out of love. The kind of love that fears truth more than loss. And now, after all these years, the truth had finally come home, through the daughter who once left me behind. The morning after reading my husband's letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every time I stepped outside, every whisper of the wind against my window, it felt intentional. At first, I dismissed it as nerves, but then an envelope appeared under my door.
No posty.
No name. Just one sentence typed neatly on a slip of paper. Harold James Sterling's sins didn't die with him. I froze. For years, I thought I had put Sterling's legacy behind me. The inheritance, the lies, the weight of being the daughter of a man who ruined others, it had all faded into the background of my rebuilt life. But this note ripped it open again. Amanda found me staring at it. "What's wrong?" she asked. I handed it to her. She frowned, her hands trembling. "Do you think this could be from Chad?" I shook my head. Chad was cruel, but not clever. This felt calculated. Later that night, I found an unfamiliar car parked across from my house. Its headlights off, engine running. The same car was there the next evening, too. I began locking every window, checking the doors twice before bed. Henry came by one morning, noticing the exhaustion under my eyes. "You're hiding something again," he said softly. I showed him the note. He studied it carefully. "This isn't random. Someone knows your story, maybe even more than you do. I wanted to believe it was just coincidence. But when Amanda's car was broken into the next day, and the only thing missing was the letter from her father's belongings, I knew we were being hunted, not for money, but for truth. And whatever that truth was, it wasn't done with us yet. Amanda and I sat together in silence, the tension thick enough to touch. On the table between us lay the police report from her car break-in. No signs of forced entry, it said. But we both knew what that meant. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were looking for. "Mom," Amanda whispered, "if they wanted money, they'd have asked by now. This is about the letter." I nodded. My thoughts kept circling back to Sterling, the man whose shadow had haunted my entire life. If his secrets were still out there, maybe someone had a reason to keep them buried. The next day, Henry and I drove to Sterling's old estate, now abandoned. The building was decaying, paint peeling, weeds clawing through cracks in the driveway. Still, something about it felt alive. Inside, the air was thick with dust and time. I walked through the hallways, my heart echoing louder than my footsteps. Then, in what used to be the study, I found a loose floorboard under the old desk. Saw the page, my husband's name under Sterling's, the word complicit written beside it in bold, dark ink. The storm outside howled, rattling the windows. Amanda had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching the notebook against her chest. I watched her, realizing how easily the sins of one generation poison the next. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called Leonard Goldstein, the same lawyer who once handed me my father's confession. His voice on the other end sounded older, wearier. "Clara," he said quietly, "I hoped you'd never find that ledger." "You knew?" I asked, my voice trembling.
He sighed.
"Your husband wasn't a bad man, but he made choices, hard ones, to protect you and Amanda. Harold Sterling's empire wasn't just business. It was blackmail, corruption, political favors. Your husband got trapped in it." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "So the inheritance, the money I've lived on, wasn't clean," he finished. "But you didn't know. You weren't part of it." Amanda listened silently, tears running down her cheeks. "So Dad wasn't innocent," she whispered. "But he wasn't evil either. Just broken." That word, broken, hung in the air like a verdict. After we ended the call, I went to the window. The same car that had been watching us was gone, replaced by silence. Heavy, final. Maybe whoever wanted that ledger had already found what they needed. Or maybe they were waiting for my next move. Either way, I wasn't the same woman anymore. Not the grieving widow, not the forgotten daughter. I was the last witness to a buried truth, and I had a choice: destroy it or expose it. And whichever choice I made, someone was going to get hurt. I spent the morning staring at the ledger on the table. Every page felt heavier than lead, full of names, numbers, signatures, secrets that could destroy reputations, families, maybe even lives. Amanda stood near the window, her arms crossed tightly. "Mom, we can't keep this," she said softly. "If people find out what's in there, it'll ruin us." I looked up at her. "It'll ruin them, not us." She hesitated. "But Dad's name is in there too." That stopped me. Every time I thought I'd buried my grief, the truth dug it back up again. I still saw him smiling across the breakfast table, promising things would get better. Now I knew why he'd seemed so haunted. Henry came by that afternoon, his face pale, when I showed him the notebook. "You understand what you're holding, right?" he said. "This isn't just evidence. It's leverage. People have killed for less." "I'm not keeping it for leverage," I said. "I'm keeping it for closure." Amanda sat down beside me, her voice shaking. "Then what are you going to do, Mom? Burn it or expose it?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked outside, the crisp wind biting my cheeks. I stood in the middle of the garden, the one my husband and I had planted together, and opened the notebook to the first page. The ink shimmered faintly in the sunlight, fragile yet powerful. My heart raced. For a moment, I imagined tossing it into the fire pit nearby, watching the smoke carry all those ghosts away. But then I thought of all the people whose lives had been ruined in silence. Maybe it was time someone finally spoke. I turned back toward the house, decision solidifying in my chest. "We're not burning it," I said. "We're finishing what he couldn't." Amanda's eyes widened, fear and pride blending in her gaze. Because once the truth was out, there'd be no going back. The following morning began quietly, too quietly. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm that knows exactly where to strike. I brewed my coffee, pretending it was just another morning, but my mind was already racing ahead. I had sent encrypted copies of Sterling's ledger to 3 trusted people the night before, including Henry. If anything happened to me, the truth wouldn't die with me. Amanda came downstairs, her face pale. "Mom," she said, holding up her phone. "Someone just called pretending to be from the insurance company. They asked about a missing document, the ledger." My blood ran cold. They knew. Before I could reply, there was a loud bang from outside. We rushed to the window. The mailbox had been smashed in, papers scattered everywhere. A warning. Henry arrived minutes later, his car tires crunching against the gravel. "You need to leave this place," he said firmly. "These aren't people who argue. They erase." But I shook my head. If I run now, I'm no better than Sterling or my husband. They hid the truth. I won't. Amanda grabbed my hand. "Then we fight smart. We release it, but on our terms." Her voice trembled, but there was strength in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Together, we sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where my husband once planned family dinners, and began typing a statement. Not dramatic, not vengeful, just truth. Every word we wrote felt like pulling a thorn from an old wound. By evening, Henry helped us upload the files to multiple journalists and independent investigators. It was done. I stood outside as thunder rolled across the sky, rain starting to fall. The house behind me glowed warm, but my heart felt strange. Part grief, part freedom. For years, I had lived with ghosts. Tonight, I had finally set them free. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. When you expose powerful people, they don't just vanish. They strike back. The next morning, the world woke up to the story. Every major news outlet ran the headline. Energy empire exposed. Decades of fraud, bribery, and betrayal. Sterling Energy's name was everywhere, and so was mine. Clara Morgan, the whistleblower. Amanda's phone buzzed nonstop. Some messages praised us for bravery. Others were full of venom. Liar. Gold digger. Traitor. She turned her notifications off after the 3rd death threat. Henry showed up again, visibly shaken. "You need to go dark for a while," he warned. "They've lost billions overnight. People are furious. Some of them won't stop until they find someone to blame." I nodded. I've been blamed my whole life. But this time, I'll survive it. That night, we packed what we could, clothes, documents, Amanda's laptop, and left through the back road. The rain was pouring, the highway nearly deserted. I caught our reflection in the window, a mother and daughter who had finally stopped running from the truth. But the past wasn't done with us. Not yet. Halfway to the safe house, headlights appeared in the mirror. A black SUV. Too close. For miles, it didn't pass, didn't slow down. Just followed. Amanda's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "Mom, they're tailing us." I told her to keep driving. Calm, steady. My heart, though, was pounding so loudly it drowned out the rain. When the road curved near the bridge, the SUV suddenly accelerated, headlights flashing once. Twice. Then it veered off, disappearing into the fog as quickly as it had come. Silence filled the car. Amanda exhaled shakily. Why would they stop? Because they've already done what they came to do, I whispered, glancing at the GPS. It was dead. The signal was gone. Whoever was watching us knew where we were now. And they were waiting. The storm had finally passed, but the air still smelled of danger. Amanda and I reached the cabin Henry had arranged deep in the woods, far from the city, far from the chaos. The flickering fireplace cast long shadows across the wooden walls, and for the first time in days, we could breathe. But peace didn't last long. Around midnight, headlights cut through the darkness again. Slow, deliberate. I reached for Amanda's hand. "Stay behind me." The door creaked open. It wasn't who I expected. Henry stepped in, soaked from the rain, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "It's over," he said. "The files are out everywhere now. No one can stop them. The feds have opened a full investigation." Relief washed over me, followed by something else, sadness. "And the people behind it?" I asked. He nodded. "They'll pay. Every single one." Amanda let out a shaky laugh. "Then we did it." But my chest tightened. "We did," I whispered, though my mind was miles away, on the people we'd lost, on the years I spent silent, believing that keeping peace was better than telling the truth. I finally realized how wrong I'd been. Henry placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was a newspaper clipping. Whistleblower Clara Morgan sparks National Reform Inquiry. Amanda smiled through her tears. "Mom, you changed everything." I looked at her, the woman she'd become, strong and unafraid, and felt something inside me settle. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "We did." As dawn broke over the forest, light spilled into the cabin, painting everything in gold. The fear, the betrayal, the pain, it all faded, replaced by quiet strength. I poured myself a cup of coffee, staring at the sunrise. "Let them come," I murmured. "I'm done hiding." This was no longer a story about revenge or survival. It was about redemption, a mother and daughter who found truth, and in doing so, found themselves again. And as I watched the morning unfold, I smiled. Because after everything, I finally knew peace. Clapperboard if you felt Clara's journey, her courage, her pain, her strength. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More stories like this are coming, stories about justice, about hope, and about women who refuse to stay silent.